A few weeks ago, I invited people on Instagram to ask me a question. So today I'm going to be going through some of those questions and hopefully giving some answers. Susan asks, where do you find inspiration? That's a good question. Inspiration is different for every artist. For me, lately, over the last couple years, I'm just really drawn to sunlight. And I know that sounds a little cliche, but maybe bright sun, like shining off a car, high contrast, street scenes, neighborhood scenes, those types of things. But I get excited about so many subjects. I will say this, what I don't do is wait for inspiration, because there's a lot of days where I don't really particularly feel inspired. And if I wait for inspiration, I'm missing out on a lot of time to paint. Sometimes I don't really feel inspired, but once I get going, the inspiration will kind of follow. So yeah, inspiration is tricky. I mentioned earlier, I'm really into music. So if I'm on the fence about painting, or still just thinking a lot about the day that I had, but now it's time to paint, I'm not really feeling like painting. If I listen to music, something about it just gets me in the mood to paint. Marla asks, what is your favorite mop brush and how many paintings do you ruin between good ones? Asking for a friend. Can't wait for the video. All right. Thanks for the question, Marla. So the easy one. So my favorite mop brush is this Escoda brush, and this is from the Joseph Zbukvich signature series. It's just a solid brush. I've had it for quite a while, and I really like it. If you're looking for something that's a little more affordable, this is a really good brush too, and it is a Raphael Soft Aqua size 8. So they make a nice affordable mop brush as well. Now, as far as the second part of the question, how often do I ruin a painting between the good ones? Probably 1 in every 4. I just kind of throw in my scrap pile and paint on the back of that paper. But it depends. Sometimes I find a subject that's a lot more difficult for me, and it takes me several times, and I might just never be really happy with it and just maybe come back to it later. What colors are on my palette? So I've actually posted this on Instagram. If you scroll down, you can see my post where I explain everything that's on my palette. Okay, Brittany asks, what are some of my favorite artists that have inspired me? So you can see a lot of those artists in my work. So one of my favorite artists early on was Joseph Zbukvich. Obviously, he's super talented, and a lot of people try to paint like he does. And early on, probably the first year of my painting, I was really trying to just paint a lot like Joseph. And so that's kind of common when you're first learning. You can gravitate to one artist that you really love and just want to paint exactly what they are painting. I've expanded my influences, and that's important too, to find several people that really inspire you. Another one, obviously, is Andy Evenson. He really helped me understand values a lot better, and my painting just veered off in another direction, and I believe it got a lot stronger when I was combining the things about Joseph that I loved and the things about Andy that I loved, and also another artist from Australia, Ross Patterson. He is fantastic, and I just love his work quite a bit, and I've learned a lot from watching his videos and studying his paintings as well. Also, Trevor Chamberlain, an old British watercolorist that Andy Evenson turned me on to. Those are my main influences. How do you paint a car sideways? I actually made a video on painting cars, so check out that video. I do talk about painting cars at an angle, so you can hopefully get some of that info there. Francis Lee asks, when did I start painting watercolor? About 6 years ago. I'd always been into drawing and really fascinated with art, but I had never really tried to learn to paint. After I had my son, I started to realize that I didn't have a lot of free time, and I really needed a creative outlet. I play the drums, I'm really into music, and That's a little trickier to do when you have a newborn in the house. And so I was always fascinated with art, and I thought, I want to start to learn how to paint. And watercolor to me just seemed like the easiest medium, the most accessible. You didn't have to buy a whole lot of equipment or anything like that. And so I just started painting watercolor, and I became hooked and obsessed, and I found some great artists that I loved and just kept painting, and it kind of changed my life in a way. Do I dedicate a time of day every day to paint? So my creative time, my time to work on painting and whatever else is involved with that is my evening time. So I work a day job 4 days a week, and my painting time starts after my family responsibilities are done. So I have 2 kids and I'm married. We come home, we have family dinner, and then there's, stuff that needs done for the family, hanging out with the kids, having family time, getting the kids to bed. When that time is over, from then until it's time for me to go to sleep, it's usually the time that I'm painting or working on a video or whatever needs to get done. But when I first started, it was very important to me to try to paint every day. I was afraid if I stopped painting and stopped committing in that way, that I would stop painting. And I remember that being a fear of mine. If I don't do this every night, if I don't get into it every day and I'm not thinking about it at least a little bit every day, then I'll stop doing it. It did help me stick with it and advance and get better. Now I have a lot more that I'm working on. So every night can't be a painting night. I might have a Patreon video I'm editing or making content like this, or doing some type of entering a show, or there's just a lot of other things that go into this now that I'm actually doing more with it than just creating the paintings. All right, do I use masking fluid? I've never used masking fluid. Some people like it, but I've just the way I've learned to do it is just to preserve my whites on the paper and paint around things and leave things behind, and that's how I've always done it. So it seems like another stage that I don't really want to mess with, and I'd rather just. Usually, there's not a super complicated scene where I have to have very precise small areas masked out. And if I do need tiny little areas, I use a little bit of gouache. Using gouache and painting around my highlights and preserving them, that's how I've always done it. All right, there's some more technical questions that are probably a little more in depth than I'm going to get into today on specific techniques. I will just say, please refer back to the videos I'm posting weekly. A lot of these questions are covered in some of those videos. Yeah, someone asked, what is my painting journey like, and how do I stay motivated while seeking improvement? So I mentioned earlier that I started painting after my son was born. I was fortunate enough to take a few workshops and find some good videos from artists, and honestly, just continuing to practice and continuing to show up. I remember there were stretches of time where I didn't feel like I was progressing very much. Um, you just got to keep working through those. And I know people gave me that advice too. Artists and workshops that I would take, they'd say, it's not the answer everyone wants to hear, but you just got to get more miles on your brush. You got to keep painting and keep showing up. And that's how the real improvement comes. It takes time. There's no shortcuts in this. I try to provide education that helps people kind of think about some of the things that have been helpful for me, and hopefully that can speed people up. But at the end of the day, it's really just continuing to show up and keep practicing. Okay, someone says, how do you manage social media addiction and focusing on your art? That's a great question. I honestly just don't have a whole lot of time. And, I get sucked into social media just like everybody else. But being a dad, working a job, pursuing things with my art, creating content takes up a lot of my time. So I just don't have a whole lot of time to think about social media other than the things that I'm going to post. But just like anyone else, I get sucked in. I might scroll on Instagram longer than I want to. I will say if I'm trying to focus on something, I don't leave my phone even on my desk. I just turn it off, put it behind me. It's too easy to pick up and look at if it's just sitting right there too. So that's about all the advice I'd have to give on that. Someone else asks, what are your most used colors and brands? And so I use Daniel Smith watercolors. That's just what I've always used. There's a lot of great brands. I'm not super picky on that. The colors that I use the most: cobalt blue, raw sienna, cerulean, cobalt turquoise. That's what I use to mix my greens. Someone else asked about mixing greens. What I mainly use to mix greens: raw sienna, cobalt turquoise. Those are the foundation for most of my greens. I use a lot of cobalt turquoise because you can mix it with so many other colors and just come up with a whole lot of greens. So yeah, so raw sienna, cobalt blue, cerulean blue, burnt sienna, those are the colors that I probably burn through the fastest. Those are the ones I'm always replacing and having to add more. Alright, thank you guys very much for submitting questions. Thank you guys for watching. One more thing I'm going to mention: if you haven't checked out my free video lesson, How to Avoid Overworking Your Painting, take a look at it. It answers some questions and solved a problem that I had early on when I was painting, which is overworking my painting. So take a look at that free lesson. Follow the link in my bio if you're on Instagram. Follow the link below if you're on YouTube. Keep painting, keep practicing, and moving forward, and I'll see you next time.